May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts always be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So many years ago, when I worked at the ad agency, I had to spend a number of weeks on the road doing spring break promotions across the country with a group of young college students. And we would do these promotions at a spring break location. And I was the mother hen as well as the coordinator of all of this. And there we were at Daytona Beach, the week of spring break, which is why my kids never went on spring break. And they kind of allowed us to have the night before official spring break opening, we got to play at everybody else's promotional places. And one of the things they built at that point was this giant tower with a little elevator, and it was probably, 7 or 8 stories high, and it was for bungee jumping. And the students said to me, oh, let's get the old lady to go up there. Not that I was that much older than they, but I was the mother hen, so they decided that they were going to drag me up to the top of this tower. And I got up there, and the man explained it to me, how it worked, and I said, let me get this straight. You're going to put me in that harness, and then you're going to attach the harness to that big rubber band thing, and then you want me to walk to the end of the platform and jump off, and that little guy down there is going to catch me. And he said, yeah, you'll probably bounce a couple of times, and then he'll catch you. And I looked at that rubber band thing, and I looked at him and I said, hell no. I need to get down to the bottom. Now, the reason I tell this story is because in today's gospel, I would be in the boat. I would be in the boat saying to Peter, get back in the boat. You don't know how deep it is. You don't know how much stuff is in that water. I mean, just because Jesus is walking on water does not mean you get to walk on water too. I would have pulled out all the mom things and gave him every possible reason why he should not have gotten out of the boat. And I say this with all truthfulness, I would not have gotten out of the boat. And what happens today in today's gospel is that the poor folks in the boat have been battered. They have been stuck overnight in this fishing boat. And if you've ever seen pictures of them, this was not a wonderful thing. They're probably wet and cold and tired. They're afraid. And here it is, morning is breaking and it's all hazy. And they see someone walking on water coming towards them. Now, seeing anybody walking on water is going to make you afraid. And so they are afraid. And Jesus says, it is I. He uses the Greek equivalent of the great I am. And he says, do not be afraid. And of course, Peter basically then moves forward into, I'm going to walk on water out to meet the Lord. And he gets to a certain point, he realizes that this is not a smart move, and he starts to sink. Now, most people, and I have preached this, so I can say this, there will be a lot of preachers today who will focus on the fact that Jesus says to Peter, well, thou of little faith. As if the issue of him sinking was about his faith. But that's not really what's going on here. Yes, Peter is impetuous, and yes, Peter is, prone to do some really dumb things. But I kind of give him a little bit of space here because he at least got out of the boat. There were 11 other folks who didn't. But what Peter does, and what people confuse here, is the fact that they think it's about faith. And this is really a passage about what's the difference between faith and belief. And the line that separates that is when Peter says, if it is you, Lord, then command me to come to you. If it really is you, Lord, you truly are the Lord, then you will command me, give me your authority to walk on water to you. What he's saying is, prove it to me, Lord. Prove to me that you are the Lord. And if you are, then I will have the authority to walk on water. Then I will believe that it is truly you. And of course he gets to this point where he goes, okay, I kind of believe. And then reality sets in and he starts to sink. And, the whole issue here is Jesus comes up to him and says, didn't have much faith, did you? But what Jesus is saying is, you didn't have faith past belief. Because we all confuse belief and beliefs with faith. If you say to someone, what's your faith? You're really asking them for a list of their beliefs, their dogma, their theology, their doctrine. What is your faith? What is your religious group? What is your religious authority? So we tend to use the two terms interchangeably, but they're not really interchangeable. Faith is belief, or I shouldn't use the same word in the thing. Faith is what we see when we can't see it. I forget what was Hebrews. Faith is the assurance of what we hope for and the certainty of what we cannot see. And that's exactly what happens here. See, Peter wants to believe with his intelligence and with proof, but faith cannot be proven. I explain to people the difference between faith and belief this way. When I get on a plane, an airplane to fly somewhere, experience and wisdom tells me that the scientists have pretty much proved that the plane can get off the ground. I believe the plane can get off the ground and fly. However, there are two issues of faith that go with that. The first is I have to have faith that that plane can get off the ground, and I have to have faith that the pilot of that plane knows how to fly and knows how to get that plane to fly safely to wherever I'm going. And so I can believe that the plane can fly, but I have no proof that it will do that and that I will get to wherever I'm going until I actually get there. This is the equivalent of saying, I believe in salvation, but really what we're saying is, I have the assurance that what God has told me, God's guarantee of salvation. Because the only way we can actually say that we believe it with knowledge and wisdom is the day we actually experience it. And so what Peter is doing here is he's not actually being faithful, he's testing the Lord. This is what they call do not test the Lord. And I know for a fact that very often people will say, well, of course I believe. But this past week, I was reminded of the difference between faith and belief by Joe Biden's quote that his wife had put on her mirror that comes from the Danish existentialist theologian Søren Kierkegaard. And that phrase is, faith sees best in the dark. And what he's saying is that belief can only take you so far. Belief can only take you to the point where you no longer can see hope. You know, it's easy to believe when you can see it out there. It's easy to hope when there's light on the path. But when it's dark and you see no light and you can't tell what is possible, you have no hope, that is where faith steps in and takes you along the path. And faith is one of those things that can't be measured. And all too often I see people, families, who are in what is called the dark night of the soul. They have been pushed to the brink of all of their beliefs, and now they are in the dark. And the vision of hope that they have is not to be seen. And what they fall back on, the folks who make it to the other side, those who make it to the other side and still believe in the assurance of all God's promises, are the ones who go in faith. And it's hard to do. And yet I see people do it all the time. They come to that end just as Peter did. And all of a sudden, all of their wisdom and their sagacity suddenly isn't enough, and they sink. I was reminded, as I was looking at Kierkegaard's writings, that a number of years ago, Mother Teresa, they had an autobiography on her, and it was about the time they were thinking about making her a saint. And in this autobiography and biography, they talk about the dark night of the soul that she experienced. This horrifying darkness where she couldn't see God, she couldn't believe, she struggled with all kinds of things and her own worthiness. And it went on for a very long period of time. And people excoriated her. How could she possibly be a saint if she doubts? How could she possibly be a saint if she doesn't believe absolutely? Because most people believe that faith is the entire absence of doubt. But faith is actually what happens in the face of doubt. When you have doubt, it's faith that carries you forward. And Mother Teresa really suffered for a very long time, and yet she still kept doing her ministry. She still kept doing what God called her to do. She did it through faith. She was in the darkness, but her faith took her forward to do God's will, in the assurance that that's what would happen. And, you know, even as Peter is falling down, he's starting to sink. And Jesus gives him a little poke. Yeah, didn't have enough faith, did you? He doesn't let Peter drown. He reaches out his hand and pulls him up and takes him back to the safety of the boat. That is the assurance of God's love. Jesus says, at that point where all the things that you believe and all the things that you can see, when they start to make you wonder, when they start to really not give you the foundation you need to walk on water, faith starts. And as we look at the world around us right now, somehow so many of us feel like we are in the dark night of the soul. When we can't see the hope, the light at the end of the tunnel. When we want to say, Lord, is it you? Is it you? If it is you, let me walk on water. And that's belief. But our hope is in the fact that in faith, when we get to that point where we can't do it anymore, where the dark night of the soul seeks to make us sink, we have God's assurance, God's guarantee, and God's love in faith that says, I know that you are sinking, but take my hand and I will take you safely back to the boat. Amen.